Good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. This is BRN AM for Monday, September 16th, 2019. Here are your headlines. Medical costs jump and are on the rise. And living your dreams from NBC's The Voice to the studio. In our first segment, it's Social Media Monday. And we're going to be talking about the recent Department of Labor core inflation numbers where medical and healthcare expenses are on the rise. Joining me now, Senior Financial Services Editor from LinkedIn, Devin Banerjee. So Devin, the story we are following is that the Department of Labor recently released core inflation numbers. And when you peel back the onion and look at home and medical healthcare expenses, they are through the roof. What can you tell us there?
Yeah, if you think about inflation, Jeff, a healthy amount of inflation is good and is something that, economists and central banks always look for. But typically we're looking for inflation when it's being driven by business investment or a healthy consumer who is, pursuing discretionary spending. What the Labor Department came out and said last week, which was really interesting, is that there was a healthy, absolute level of inflation, but it's really being driven by those medical and health insurance costs. So the Labor Department came out and said, core consumer, prices were up 2.4%. But as part of what it looks at, there was an 18.6% jump in the insurance price index, which is actually the largest jump on record. So those figures were for the month of August, year over year. And look, as we've talked about, Jeff, total health spending is approaching 20% of GDP at this point, and we're really starting to see that drive inflation here in the U.S. And as we've also talked about, there are knock-on effects, so many knock-on effects of rising healthcare costs. One that we featured this week and saw a really passionate conversation around is how, if you think about, the aging population here in the US, we have, I think, about 10,000 boomers turning 70 years old every day here in the US. And their healthcare costs have risen. As we've talked about, they haven't typically saved enough over their careers and their lifetimes to address that. And one of the knock-on effects is that we're seeing women really bear the brunt in families of that burden of taking care of an older relative. And so, at this point, about 15% of women working age 25 to 54, are caring for an older relative. And we saw the Center for American Progress come out recently and estimate that about $29 billion in household wages for families in the US has been lost annually now because of that employment gap where women are taking some time away from work to care for aging family members.
Devin, last week we talked about how home healthcare workers, some of them are living below the poverty line. When you look at these inflation numbers, especially around healthcare, it's astronomical. And we know that in retirement, right now it's projected that couples living in retirement will spend close to $300,000. When you and I get to retirement, this is going to be astronomical. What gives here?
Yeah, I will say, and this strays a bit into policy and politics, but there have been some, attempts here in the U.S., including by this administration, currently the Trump administration, to stem at least some of those costs, for example, coming from prescription drug makers and distributors. But at the same time, the system, as I think you and I have spoken about, Jeff, has become so convoluted that, kind of relying on and waiting for policy to change may be a losing battle. So yeah, obviously there's personal health, wellness, fitness. There are, some people put responsibility on employers to educate employees more about how to be healthy and how to minimize those costs. And then at the end of the day, Jeff, like you talk about all the time, and you and I talk about often, when we are saving for not just retirement, but for the future, at this point, we have to just realize that a lot of what we're saving is for these rising inevitable healthcare costs. And so it's a combination of all of those things, but I think it reinforces, again, the importance of budgeting, and then after budgeting, saving and investing for retirement, but that includes long-term healthcare costs as well.
Devin, we're certainly living a lot longer, and there are certainly, each of us has genetic predispositions to certain diseases, but there seems to be a lot of waste in the healthcare system. You're following a lot of financial technology or fintech firms. Are they jumping in here? Are they looking for ways to help improve some of these healthcare costs?
There are so many. As a matter of fact, it's funny you mentioned that. Just a few days ago, one of my colleagues here at LinkedIn notified us that she'll be leaving to go work for a health tech startup. And I'm seeing that trend quite a bit. There are many popping up in fintech and health tech. A lot of them are working on educational kind of tools to, for example, allow you to quickly and efficiently compare different insurance plans or different healthcare providers or other healthcare service, providers or product providers, for example. So a lot of the work is around, more efficient education and information. Other than that, there are, of course, kind of on the nonprofit side, a lot of organizations that are working on the policy efforts on the policy front with lobbying and kind of local educational efforts for voters in different places in the country. So I think there are a lot of organizations and companies cropping up to work on this issue because it's one of those that affects everyone. It affects all of us.
Devin, listening to you talk about healthcare, it sounds very similar to our conversations about retirement. Does this all come down to individuals and each of them making their own separate decisions based on their needs?
Yeah, I mean, I will say on your point about a lot of it comes down to individuals and their decision making. I'm a bit hopeful in seeing some younger people I've worked with and helped with their kind of personal financial management and retirement options. I've noticed more of them also paying attention to their health insurance options and their sort of medical care options and stuff like that. And I think, a lot of this wider societal conversation about healthcare costs, including the conversation that we hear a lot from Washington or we see in political debates now, we're approaching election season. I think some of that is spilling into younger people and maybe generally more workers' minds. And so hopefully they feel more empowered to make, to use their wallet and their spending power and their spending decisions to kind of influence the healthcare industry. So that's just a hopeful note.
Thank you, Devin. Great speaking with you, and look forward to catching you again next week on our Social Media Monday segment.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care.
And when we come back, we're going to meet Dylan Hartigan, recently featured on NBC's The Voice, where he was a finalist, and now he is getting set to record and launch his own album right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. All of us are pursuing our dreams, whether it's after high school or before retirement. And my next guest is pursuing a singer-songwriter career. He's been featured on NBC's The Voice, and he's even played with artist Kelly Clarkson. Let's welcome to the show musician Dylan Hartigan. So I want to start off by asking you, Dylan, what was it like going from New Jersey to Nashville, Tennessee to work on your album?
It was very surreal. I've had the opportunity to share in the making process of this album with some of what are now my favorite artists. It's been a collaboration. They started off as my songs and they ended up becoming our songs. I have musicians like Kyle Whalum and Sarah Tomek and Alex Haddad and a band Them Vibes and Maggie Rose. I mean, it's just like these countless artists that I've just grown an appreciation for so much over this whole entire making process. Yeah. And they have a footprint on the album now. So,
well, it's certainly great to collaborate with others when we're doing a project. You've recently appeared on NBC's The Voice, but can you take our audience through how we got to this point of you recording an album set for 2020?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a funny story. I played a show in Allentown, Pennsylvania with Kelly Clarkson, and at the show we played a song called Stop, Look, and Listen. There was a band that opened for Kelly, Maggie Rose's band, who I just mentioned, that heard the song while we were playing it on stage and loved it, but had no idea who I was. After the show, we were all backstage having a good time, drinking a little bit, and yada, 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 and all that stuff, you know. And I split off from Chelsea, who's my manager, and I went and I had a conversation with all of the musicians in Maggie's band. And we hit it off super well. And I came back in and I was really excited because I was like, oh my God, this is great. I just made a great connection with some really awesome people. And I walked into this really long hallway. It was like a really long hallway. And at the end of the hallway, I saw Chelsea, and both of us made like the same face at each other. So I was like, oh my God, she must have news because I have news. So like we started walking really, really fast to each other. And I got to her and I was like, you'll never guess what just happened. And she said to me, she was like, you'll never guess what just happened to me. And then I told her that I had just met Maggie Rose and we had hit it off really well. And she told me that she had just had like an entire conversation and like night with Austin Marshall, who is Maggie's husband and manager, and hit it off super well. So it's just like, it was so weird. The moments were just meant to happen. Yeah. I was meant to meet Maggie at that moment, and Chelsea was meant to meet Austin. And it was just like that night, it was fated in the stars, I guess.
Life is certainly about an opportunity. It looks like you're definitely seizing yours. I think our audience would be curious to know about the creation process for building your album. What's that like?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. I think I might have mentioned this before, the Bob Dylan quote with you. I brought it up once, I think. He says that he never made the songs, they just came to him. And I have a very strong connection with that concept of I'm almost a vessel for the songs to come out. Everything happens to everybody in this world, and experiences are, you know, a dime a dozen. And I've just been granted, I think, the ability and somewhat luck to be able to take what the world has to offer and put it into words and sounds and melodies. All of the things that I write, all of the things that I feel, they come from the experiences that I've had in the world that I'm submerged in. So So every word, every sound, every feeling comes from the world around me. And I think it's really important to give credit where credit is due. Uh, so yeah, I think it's a really cool concept, and I'm really lucky to be able to do that.
Dylan, your sister Chelsea is the business arm. She's your manager, and you continue to generate the content and be the creative end of the business. What's that like, having someone so close to you be a part of this process?
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to coin the phrase sisterger. So I don't know how well it's gonna do, because we brought it up in a couple of conversations and everybody's been like, what?
I certainly think you should hashtag it.
Yeah, hashtag. That's how it'll really start coming up. But it's really important, I think, because the splitting of effort for an artist to have to focus on business and creativity can be really difficult.
Yeah.
Granted, I know a bit about the business that we're trying to build, because we are trying to start from the ground up. And in order for me to be involved in the process, I have to know the business plans and everything like that. But having her is really huge, because it not only allows me to be 100% in on the creative side, but it also allows for somebody who's very smart and in tune with the business world to be 100% in the business side of it, which can't be lacking. Just like the creative side can't be lacking, the business side can't be lacking. If we're striving to achieve something that's sustainable and provides longevity from like a social standpoint. So it's really big, and it comes in handy in a lot of situations.
So let's shift gears and talk about the business end. Now, in terms of your album, you've chosen to both crowdfund and take on investors. Can you shed a little bit more light into that process?
Yeah. So the way that we've been going about this is our goal is investments. So about a third of our donations have come from crowdfunding, like you said, just to prove to the fans that we want them to be involved in it just as much as we're involved in it, because at the end of the day, we are trying to build a family and a community around the music. But about 2/3 of our money that we've made, which is $33,000 out of the $50,000 budget that we are shooting for, and we business planned out. About 2/3 of that has come from investments, and the way that we are working with our investors is we're basically dividing up into percentages and numbers, essentially, how much you get back from your investment. So say you invest $15,000 into the project, you get a certain percentage of royalties that we get back through our label. So we created a label called Hartigan Studios label, which everything is sourced through. So it's almost like that's the root, and then the branches spread out to the investors, and then that way there's not so many names on the project, but each person involved in the project has the money coming back to them. So it creates this kind of community around the whole entire thing, which is really important to us, because we're super invested in the whole family concept, obviously, because my manager is my sister, and everybody we work with is super family oriented. But yeah, that's the business standpoint. We really are trying to build a tree around the roots when it comes to publicists or investors, or where the money comes from, or all that stuff.
So you recently came back from Nashville, Tennessee, where you had another great recording session. But when we look ahead into 2020, what's next? Is that when your album's going to drop?
So we have a release plan that we are still currently working on, but we have basically all the kinks figured out and everything like that. February, our album is going to start dropping, so we're going to start releasing our singles then, and we have plans for meetings with publicists. We're hoping to get signed to a booking agent once we get the final mixes back of the album. But really just continuing grinding. I mean, every week we're in the van on the road, traveling to different cities along the East Coast, barely eating and surviving off of, dollar bills that we find in our pockets. So it's just, and that's like a great thing about it too, is being able to just I'm just gonna hop in the van in 2 days and go to New York and then to Boston and then to Philly and just play music for people who want to hear it. Yeah. And it's just and I get to think about that, and then we also get to think about the business, and it's just like it's such a beautiful balance of the world that I've chosen to submerge myself in, that the whole team has chosen to submerge themselves in.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Dylan. Looking forward to having you back. Take care and all the best.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jeff. Once again, thanks for having me back.
Well, folks, that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Hey, have a financial topic or someone of interest that we should interview? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the latest headlines in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and much more, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Waiting here for you to take and drink of. But if you're tired of the same